course, what Chucky Cross is leaving out of the description there is, sure, he had Dylan records there, but that photo has been captioned as Jimi Hendrix, Hyde Park Hotel, 1967. And there's another record, I think it's a Dylan record, is sort of posed sideways, and then the record that's actually most conspicuous is Lenny Bruce is out. In other words, you know, he was willing to acknowledge Dylan as an influence, but the thing that really captivated him at that particular moment, again, 1967, right as he was becoming famous, is this self-published record by Lenny Bruce at 8825 Hollywood Boulevard. Lenny Bruce is out again. So here we are at City Hall, and waiting for the public safety meeting to begin. And so we walk in to take a pee here in the sort of back area, the rear exit of City Hall Council Chambers. And Chuck is talking about lost documents that I uncovered about Jimmy and the Army, and how he got out of the Army pretending that he was gay. Which, I haven't checked that out thoroughly myself, but the idea that Chucky claims that he discovered it and he's confident in the authenticity of the documents, of course, makes me very suspicious. In fact, I was speaking to someone a couple of months ago about how Jimmy never mentioned that to him. That would have made a hell of a story, but he never mentioned that to me, the informant said. But it was the tagline that was meant to sell the book. So we're going to pop in. Just opening the doors now.
Thank you.
Richard Lee, please.
Well, Nick Licata, you're the president of the City Council. You're also the chair of the Public Safety Committee. 3 days after the mass murder on Capitol Hill in March, you promised everyone at the Miller Community Center that you were going to assist the police in getting to the bottom of this, that the truth would be known, and so soon was hired Mr. James Allen Fox, professor at Northeastern University, and he was going to write a report, and he managed to complete that report in 3 months, which is a cover-up scheme. He even says in his introduction that it is probable that many of the absolute truths will remain forever buried in this case. The reason the truths are forever buried is because he's burying them, and so are you. Professor Fox and the Washington State Patrol attempted to authenticate the suicide letter without looking at the lengthy exemplar that he wrote to the court in Montana several years ago in a vandalism case. They authenticated the note with scraps of paper in his wallet and receipts, not a lengthy exemplar letter. They did not look at the actual hard drive. Even on Tuesday, March 28th, it was already known that that hard drive was in the trash and that the Seattle police refused to come by and pick it up. So they've concocted some hard drive out of thin air. And it claims to have all of this extensive material. When I spoke to Fox 10 days ago, he didn't even know about the neighbor who pulled the hard drive out of Kyle Huff's computer days before the murders. He never bothered to ask the medical examiner for autopsy information. He was told by the police attorney, he says, don't bother to ask about that, it's not important and you won't get it anyway. It's confidential. Well, there's never been a murder prosecution that involved drugs or anything else where the medical examiner's report wasn't in part released as a part of the prosecution. It's not absolutely confidential. It's just that this James Allen Fox was told, don't look there. There's also no accounting for the drugs that were found on the premises. In fact, it's not even mentioned. And Mr. Kimmerer here, the deputy chief, who's in this room right now, who you could ask about this, he said that the return on the service of the warrant indicated nothing of interest other than the weapons, although 6 baggies of marijuana would tend to indicate drugs packaged for sale. So why was that not included in the report? Why was that not drawn as a part of this individual's background? Because it's all a big cover-up. Okay? And the only thing that anyone can do at this point to make the reasonable level of disclosure available to the public is to have an inquest. And I suggested this. And what work have you done on forwarding the idea of an inquest to the King County Executive?
Thank you,
Mr. Licata.
Thank you for your comment.
Could he answer the
Your time is up.
question? What's all the work that you've done on the inquest issue?
Thank you for your comments. Your time is up, Rick. So we'll read off.
Well, this is the first time we've seen this, but here goes. Oh, that came across pretty well. Clark has his own Buttafuoco look-alike today, and they rolled in like a posse, man. These suckers is rolling like 4 or 5 deep. You know, big burly guys in suits. Entourage with the Clarkster. And gotta get some appointments to the Human Rights Commission, and then we're right into Statement of Legislative Intent by Deputy Chief Clark Kimmerer and Captain Les Liggins and his honey drippers. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Joe Liggins and the honey drippers. And a consultant, Peter Balimo. So I don't know what the Buttafuoco's there for, but hope they're not going to try any funny business with us today. I think they're up already. So we've got a lot of witty things to say about this and that, but we got to roll ourselves because the chief, as he's sometimes called, correctly, by the way, it's somehow correct to call the assistant chief or the deputy chief a chief. He's a deputy. Deputy chief. Goes around calling himself chief. We've covered that before. And they want the media to do that too. And sometimes they comply. You know, broadcast media. Hey, chief, tell us about it, chief. Coach? Coach Dicka? But all indications are Clark and the posse will be rolling with some very specific intent to defraud the taxpayers of the extent of public disclosure to which we're entitled today. So, we're going to have to try to roll with them, you know. We're going to roll with the punchers. Well, Clark is in there with the boys talking about staffing levels and precincts and the number of beats, and the first watch and the second watch and the third watch, and all that sort of wonky cop stuff. And we're just out here with the flag, hoping it'll protect us with its flaggy goodness. But it's 2:41, and this is going to be a short meeting, and we're anticipating evasive action from the Clark man. Clark Kimmerer, Deputy Chief, Seattle Police Department.
Kind of purposes of maintaining this level of integrity and community kind of identification with precincts, that we would keep the North Precinct essentially as it is, that we're not going to be crossing the Mont Lake cut and reconfiguring east, which was one early proposal, which means that the North Precinct's going to have a much larger number of beats than the South and the Southwest Precinct, which are, you know, smaller in population and service hours.
So my understanding is that the boundaries of these 25 beats, and we'll call them the new beat, they're not going to be determined by a per capita, how many people live in the area. They'll be determined by the number of 911 calls, presumably. So my follow-up question is, if over time the 911 calls vary, which they do, does that mean that the boundaries then will be flexible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's a system of doing business, which is really the difference. This last system they've had in place here has been kind of cemented in. This is an ongoing dynamic process. I think the other thing too is that with the way that they'll be able to flex the staffing up and down, certain beats will be busier at certain times. If development happens, for example, on an annual basis, you should be able to use all the GIS tools you have, all the technology to move a line over. Let's adjust them. I think the key is that within those 25 areas, if they're staffed properly and managed the way we think they can be managed, the service level will be equitable, independent of whether or not there are more beats in the north or the south.
The million-dollar question, I don't know if it's a million-dollar question, is, you know, when we put all of this together, are we in a position of a shortage in terms of the number of officers? I think, you know, to be very candid, yes, we are. The question is, how significant is that? And can we meet some reasonable goals as we work with council and the executive to attempt to, you know, get closer and closer to what we hope we can achieve, which is a 7-minute emergency response time, 40% proactive time, and 10 units free. We are not at a point in our data analysis to say, well, how many officers are we short? I will assure you that it is not going to be a number in our first iteration that takes your breath away. But I can say it's going, there is a shortfall. We want to, again, give you the best data we can to identify that. And then we all have to make decisions, but particularly the executive.
A good department, but like I said, we can be better. But equity is something that we seek for the community and for the department.
Is this all bargainable? I can't recall.
Well, we brought up with the board.
Okay, yeah.
The shifts are bargaining. We argue strongly that redrawing beat lines is not a collective bargaining issue, but we sit down with the union and talk with them about everything, as we should.
Should we hear from them perhaps sometime?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a new union president,
Yeah.
Victor O'Neill. I'd like to have him
No, I think it would be useful.
committee sometime,
Mhm.
hear their perspective on
Yeah.
some of these issues.
It'd be useful.
Well, not that I have any, lack of confidence.
We encourage a full and open dialogue.
How does this work with, say, responding to extreme emergencies? I mean, just take, for example, Friday night, which sounds to me like the force responded amazingly quickly with an awful lot of personnel. Can you do that through this system throughout the day and throughout other places?
Yes, I think we are seeking to standardize that ability. The response on Friday night was, in my 24 years, one of the best I've ever seen anywhere in this country. And I want to continue to work to make sure that could occur in its appropriate kind of scale, 24/7, any day of the week, and at any place in the city. So that's part of the goal of this project. But I appreciate your recognition of that I've never been more proud of the Seattle Police Department than how to respond to that terrible event.
To get a call at 4:03 and have things wrapped up at 4:15 is extraordinary.
And I concur. But everybody also was doing what they needed to do. They knew their job and they did it with courage and with clarity of mind. That is what we seek. I mean, when I look at my role in trying to manage the team, Seattle Police Department, it is that kind of heroic, intelligent, compassionate response any time of the day, any day of the week, any place in the city. That might be the second kind of motto of the geopolicing project.
Thank you. Peter, any more comments?
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for a very informative briefing. And we look forward to seeing how this works out.
By the way, I never did get put on night comms.
Item 8 is Office of Professional Accountability Director reports. EPA complaint status 2004-2005.
Thought they were making a getaway, but here they come.
Hello, Richard.
Well, hi, Chief Kimmer. How are you
doing?
today?
I'm fine.
Say, sir, I think you heard the nature of my complaint about the Fox report, the report on the mass shooting.
I didn't understand it really, but
Okay.
your complaint.
Is it true that the police department only budgeted Professor Fox for 10 days?
I actually don't know. I don't think so. He was very satisfied with the contract that was.
Are you satisfied with the results, sir, fully?
Yes, I thought it was an excellent report.
What about the hard drive that is said to have been deposited into the trash only a couple of days after the murders?
You know, you'd mentioned that to me earlier, and I actually don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
I
it was
wasn't-
reported on March 28th on Channel 7, and they said that detectives were contacted, Seattle Police Department detectives, and they refused to come out and look through the trash to find the hard drive.
The hard drives were found and evaluated, and the reports of what was found on them were fully disclosed. So, I wasn't, the lead detective in this, so I have no idea.
Why do you think that Professor Fox failed to interview the neighbor who pulled out the hard drive? Wouldn't that have been an important witness to speak to?
Professor Fox was charged with trying to help us understand why Kyle Huff did what he did. That was based on his expertise, his overriding, mission. It's what we wanted him to do, and he's an expert, nationally recognized.
Is he an expert on computers, sir?
He was not charged with analyzing computers, nor to reinvestigate this
He
crime.
makes no reference to any computer expert that he consulted with.
His job, his expertise, was to help us understand what motivated Kyle Huff to do what he did.
And the answer he came up with was a Nirvana song. Are you aware of that?
I thought you would find that somehow either ironic or attractive.
Well, it's awfully interesting that the song that he refers to actually does not exist, sir.
I don't know Nirvana. I'm a Pearl Jam fan.
Okay, well, the problem is that Professor Fox did not investigate to the extent that he was able to learn that the song didn't exist.
I think Professor Fox did a superb job, and I think he helped advance our understanding of a criminal mind that would do that horrible, horrible thing up on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Richard.
You mean by attributing it to a song by the rock band Nirvana, which in fact does not exist? You Know You're Right, which was never recorded or published by Nirvana. What about the drugs, Clark? Deputy Chief? What about all those nasty drugs?
Good luck.
Thanks. What about the drugs, man? The cops suddenly give up on pursuing crimes associated with drugs? Well, Clark decided to do the limited modified hangout, which involves a dash across Fifth Avenue here. You know, in case you didn't notice it, because you get your news from the TV stations or whatever, I don't know that they reported, I would suppose that there are some sound bites that I missed of the Dan and Kathy show explaining how this was all attributable to the rock band Nirvana inspired the killer to do his mass slaying. What? What did you say? Pardon me?
If you're going to continue loudly interviewing the people and disrupting the peace, you'll need to leave the property right now.
Who said I disrupted the peace?
Please.
I just spoke to the police. I just spoke to the deputy chief. Don't you know who that guy was? Well, ma'am, you haven't given me any opportunity to cooperate in any way. You made a complaint that I was loudly interviewing people. What does that mean? You were loudly interviewing people? Well, they got this babbling brook here. Look at this. Constant background noise. Yeah, sorry, Miss Olympic Security. Just here trying to follow up on that 7-person homicide. You know, 2 weeks after the big report was out. So if you want to call that screwing around or whatever, or loudly interviewing, go ahead. Well, Clark took the front door, and we got a little bit of a soundbite there. But we actually let him off the hook just a little bit by not pointing out the truly glaring, well, one of the truly glaringly awful things about the Hoff report, which is that the 6 bags of suspected marijuana has never been accounted for. It sort of doesn't exist in the world of that report. So any background that Mr. Hoff or his brother had as drug dealers just doesn't matter. But of course, the thing is, if they could attribute possession to the brother, then they would have had to hold the brother for a lot of questioning, and that could have gotten sloppy, because then it wouldn't be an OJ type situation, you know, like Lang and Van Adder holding him down to 22 or 23 minutes, you know, of interview. OJ after his wife had her head cut off, and that waiter guy got stabbed many times, right? So if they had Kane Huff, the twin brother, in custody, believe me, as the hours ticked by, the more it would have seemed that they should have had a pool of evidence on tape about skinheads and murder schemes and hard drives and everything else. Not having him in custody means, well, they turned him loose and he didn't say anything about how the hard drive, I mean, wouldn't they want to ask, hey, what's going on with your computer, Kane? Do you think we'll find a motivation to your brother's murder there, his murder spree? And Kane would have answered, yes, detectives, except that hard drive is probably in the trash right now, so you ought to go and try to retrieve it. Again, the Channel 7 report was March 28th, 3 days after the murders, the night of the Miller Community Center meeting. So Kimmerer's in there, he's got like, you know, a full hour to sit there and talk about the great job that the police are doing, and how this geo-policing scheme that they're buying into is going to nip things in the bud. You know, where those places where the youths hang out and are making trouble, by having police more invested in an ownership of their neighborhood and their beat, we hope to nip these things in the bud. So it's not going to be Mr. Liggins and the Honey Drippers. We're going to now refer to the SPD as Chief Kimmerer and the Bud Nippers. He's not really chief, but again, even Licata calls him chief. You know, daddy, daddy, chief, daddy, daddy. All right, man, nip it in the bud. Just doing some bud nipping. Olympic security, for your information. So yeah, there is one other little badass crew here today, and that would be Sam Palka of the OPA. Not that anything of substance will be said, but we do have a theoretical question about what do you do when the whole police department is committing a massive fraud on the public about the most dramatic murder incident in, was it 23 years since the Wami massacre? Biggest case in the memory of most Seattleites. The Kyle Huff murder case. Of course, as we'll get into later, there's a competing scene of horror also downtown here, not far away, at the Jewish Federation, which was shot up. Now, all this patting on the back, you know, the thing that they're ignoring is there's a hell of a lot of murdering going on all over the town, all the time. I mean, there's just a hell of a lot of murder going on. There was a 4-person homicide on the east side, and then a big arson to cover it. And 2 women were shot while hiking. They were from Seattle. That was outside of Seattle. But most spectacularly, you know, we broke into the national news last week with this Jewish Federation building shooting. And it remains mysterious. Although what Ms. Godden said there is so amazing. You know, the shooting occurred at 4:03, and by 4:15 we had it all wrapped up. That's great policing. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, except there might be a few lingering questions, like who put the nut bag up to it, you know? You know, like the headlines are talking about this guy's 10-year history of mental illness, which appears to be entirely undocumented, except months ago, I think it was in March, at a shopping mall, he got into the fountain, allegedly, and then allegedly in some way that's never been described, exposed himself and was arrested for that and had a pending criminal case for that. Gee, that's actually straight out of the parallax view, practically. You know what I mean? It establishes that, and now of course this could be a lone nut with his own motivation, and the motivation could be to set himself up for a defense based on insanity, although they ain't going to give it to him right away. They're going to send him to prison with a long, long sentence right away. But you never know how these things play out, and he might have high hopes of getting out someday on a mental illness thing. That's not usually the way the law works, but prison overcrowding and that sort of thing, not everybody does a super long stretch for what turned out to be a single murder and then 5 other people wounded, right? So I was looking over the tape of this today, of when this was all breaking, and I believe that I'll have to double check this, but I believe the NBC News comes on at 5:30, so 90 minutes, less than 90 minutes into this, Captain Metz, or I think he's called Assistant Chief Metz now, and some guy apparently named Gomez from the FBI are in this press conference, which King only had by cell phone, and the Gomez guy from the FBI, I actually have his comments in full here in the bag, but we'll get to that later, said, oh, well, one thing that we really want to strongly emphasize and stress here is that we're really convinced that this person is the only person involved, and there's no reason to believe that this is an act of terrorism that involves any other accomplices or groups, which was definitely geared toward, the 24-hour news channels, which were probably carrying that press conference live or a satellite feed from one of the network affiliates. So literally, while they're showing clips that they had captured in the last, 60 minutes of cops running around with assault rifles, and many, many cops with their Glocks out, literally like 50 or more cops swarming the streets with their guns drawn. While they're showing you that, they actually say, and it was just one lone guy, and the FBI is pretty satisfied that there's no indication, that was the terminology, no indication that any wider group or accomplice was involved. Really? With, less than 90 minutes into it, they know this guy's whole life history? That doesn't seem possible. Because all it really would take is one nut, one guy connecting with the nut and letting him know that there's 72 virgins waiting for you, or a pot of gold for someone that, I don't want to get into a whole lot of speculation as to what suicide bombers and gun assailants are promised by their controllers or their contacts to Middle East terrorist organizations, but because it may not have been that. But then again, they didn't know that. How could they have known that 90 minutes after the shooting started? But the important thing was the spin, not the evidence. And it's the same thing with, of course, Oklahoma City and everything else. It was one lone nut with maybe one other lone nut with him, but all of McVeigh's contacts in the far right wing were totally ignored. They were chased down by, I think it was NBC News. Andreas Strassmeyer was the guy's name or whatever. Everybody knows where he is in Germany, and they got on the L train with him where they knew they could corner him, and they asked him questions about his connections with Timothy McVeigh. That's the FBI going out and doing that, That was just a news network. In fact, maybe I saw it on NBC, and it wasn't NBC, it was somebody in Europe that had gotten the footage. Anyway, they make real decisive, the TWA thing is another thing. For some reason, the TWA 800 flight could not have been terrorism. It was decided absolutely no, that's not an act of terrorism. Any evidence to the contrary was discounted. And of course, there was a lot of evidence, and that was prior to 9/11, the raging case on the East Coast. So are you indicating that somehow I'm guilty of some sort of noise ordinance violation or something? Those are both Olympic security. The time is 3:41, August 1st, and we're going to do a camera adjustment here. For you today? Well, sir, could I ask, are you entirely satisfied that allotting 10 days of budgeted time of Professor Fox was adequate for the Capitol Hill multi-murder, sir, the mass murder of 6 people, plus the suicide of the assailant? Because it seems to me like the job was really pretty half-baked in a lot of ways. Mr. Fox, Professor Fox, failed to identify the person who removed the hard drive from the computer of Kyle Huff only days before the murder, the 6-person murder. And your detectives were contacted and they refused to come out and retrieve the hard drive from the trash. Are you aware of this story, sir? Why do you think it is that legal advisor, Seattle Police Department legal advisor Leo Port, told Professor Fox that he could not gain access to any information from the autopsy report? Isn't information from autopsy reports typically used in homicide prosecutions? On March 28th of this year, Deputy Chief Kimmerer said that the toxicology report on Kyle Huff would be released. And then a month later, you contradicted this and said that the toxicology reports would not be released, sir. Why do you think that those toxicology reports should not be released to the public? Shouldn't the public know what exotic chemicals, mind-altering chemicals, the murderer may have been on at the time of the crime? Because your friend, Professor Fox, who you contracted to write this report, he didn't discuss chemicals in Kyle Huff's bloodstream. What he discussed was a Nirvana song. He's trying to blame the state of mind of the multi-murderer on the music of the rock band Nirvana. Does that seem entirely sensible to you, sir? Does it seem as if he did a thorough job of investigating this 6-person murder? If the best explanation for the state of mind of the killer is that he was inspired by a song by the rock band Nirvana, does that seem like evidence of a thorough investigation to you, Chief Kimmerer, Chief Kurlikowski? Why would they blame a 6-person homicide? Your friend, Professor Fox, the person that you personally selected to do this investigation, why do you think he blamed this mass murder on a rock song by the band Nirvana? Is that a sensible thing for him to have done? Rather than asking for the autopsy report, which in fact he did not do? What about the drugs that were found at the Kyle Huff home? Why were those drugs never accounted for? Why was there no prosecution of the person who possessed the drugs? Why is it, Chief Kurlikowski, that you allowed this Professor Fox to concoct a faked up report on a 6-person murder 3 months ago, sir? thought Olympic security was going to pounce, but they didn't. And neither did SPD. But to draw this thing down to the old long and short, who the fuck are these people kidding? Who the fuck are they kidding with this bullshit? I mean, I have seen some bullshit, folks. But this is the argument. All of the best evidence was ignored. All of the best evidence. The autopsy is the best evidence of very many things, including the killer's state of mind, because if he's wigged out on 9 hits of LSD, that's a very different assailant from a guy who's got some sexual hang-ups. Okay? So we don't know what was in his bloodstream. Do we have anything written by Kyle Huff? Nothing that wasn't all faked up, folks. Because that note found in a dumpster a mile away, a month after the fact, looks pretty goddamn phony to me, if you ask. I mean, what kind of a maniac would believe that this note wasn't fake? I mean, the headline said bizarre discovery of bizarre-ass note. I'm pretty sure the word bizarre-ass wasn't in there. But, you know, even the relatively almost completely non-cynical Seattle Crime Beat reporters had a hard time letting that one pass muster. Found a mile away in a dumpster that's cleared out at least once a week. That note, and of course the truly amazing thing that I'm saying about best evidence is, if you wanted to try to authenticate that note, the best evidence would be the evidence that was published very shortly after the murders, which is the note, the apology note that's part of the court records, which is completely in cursive writing. Although Professor Fox didn't seem to understand this. That note's completely in cursive writing, and the note that they had was completely printed out. So the best evidence of the killer's state of mind as evidenced in anything medico-legal is the autopsy report. He was told to stay away and not ask for it. He had no interaction with the King County Medical Examiner on conveying those facts, according to what he said in my interview with him. Best evidence on the note is the lengthy exemplar letter. They didn't use that. Instead, they used little scraps of paper from his wallet, receipts, and a little phone list of phone numbers. Although this guy was supposedly such a loner, it's hard to imagine he had an extensive list of contacts. Plus, they were drug contacts, in which case the Kyle Huff was known to few people bullshit doesn't hold water. He would have known a lot of people. Knowing people would have been his business if those 6 bags of marijuana were cut up as a part of his marijuana distribution scheme, right? Best evidence of his state of mind, if you don't have something written with a pen or a pencil, is his computer. Completely faked up. I mean, it's very hard to believe that the lengthy phone conversations and the hour-long interview I did with his neighbors, one of whom pulled his hard drive a few days before the murder, that adds up to nothing. I mean, I sense nothing false in any of that, and it's very difficult to ascribe a motive to this guy saying that he had the hard drive yanked out because the computer crashed. And yet, of course, the Fox report describes extensive examination of this hard drive that had a lot of extensive evidence on it from Kyle Huff's crummy old Pentium 1 or 486 computer. In a few days leading up to the murder, he probably had a lot on his mind. You know, if in fact he was planning this murder, which is the gist of the report. So the best evidence through a computer, ignored. To all evidence, they completely fabricated a new hard drive. Wow, you know? To all evidence, they completely fabricated this note. That is, to all evidence, a police forgery. really could have only been the police that would put something like this together, because it was written on a notice that went out to everyone in that complex, which is probably, 150 apartments or so with all of those buildings. So there were 150 copies of this around, let's say a minimum of 100 copies of this thing around, but it's not something that a casual forger could do as a prank, right? And then place it next to an alarm clock with a brick of clay, so it looks like it's plastique explosives, some C4 about to explode. And of course, the best evidence on the handwriting. I mean, the best evidence on the handwriting, the best evidence on the medico-legal side, and the best evidence of anything on a computer. All of those things were completely ignored, or alternatives were fabricated. And the rest of it, which we'll go into at length, is completely bizarre. About all he says about drugs is that taking ecstasy gives children the feeling of peace, love, and empathy. Wow, where have we heard that terminology before? And in case in case you're not familiar with my program, and you understand that there's no extent of pranking involved here, this is not. There's no aspect of satire when I'm dealing with these hard-ass types. The letter, the report actually says that they're blaming this Nirvana song for the murders. I mean, it doesn't say blame, but in the news reports, including the Associated Press, it's right up there in the top paragraphs that the reason he spray painted now on the sidewalk, if he did that at all, that could have easily been the cops too. There's a lot of reason to believe that. The reason he spray painted now is because of a Nirvana song called I Want to Know Now, where Cobain is supposedly screaming now, 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 and something about killing someone in the song as well. The problem is I've never seen a fake Nirvana lyric before, but this is one. And it only exists on really large lyric sites, meaning that it's never been cataloged as a Nirvana song on the Nirvana fan club and Live Nirvana and the David Pearl Nirvana page. All those long-time Nirvana web pages that attempt to be encyclopedic. They've never cataloged this song, so if he was browsing those, he wouldn't have found it. And virtually impossible for anyone to find this lyric because it doesn't exist. It was never a Nirvana song. It's all a big fraud of one sort or another. I don't know when Nirvana Dude 4894 put this up on a big lyric site. That's the only attribution I've ever seen for it. But every lyric site that has it has the same typographical errors. Run together words and misspelled words, which I can't think of any Nirvana song that altered the spelling of words. I mean, for so many reasons, including the fact that they never recorded it and never copyrighted it, and 10 other reasons. It's a complete fake. And there it is right at the top of the fucking report. It's possible, if not probable, that this is what inspired him to spray paint now on the sidewalk, within 2 or 3 minutes of slaughtering 6 people with a shotgun and a pistol. But it's all completely fake. It's all completely fake. Believe me, this guy, we knew that he wasn't going to say anything. He always does that, and he's inarticulate and a big pussy, in the most pejorative sense of the term. The guy is a total scarecrow. Saying he's a stuffed shirt implies that there's any stuffing in that shirt. There's just nothing there. You know what I mean? But even he can't deny it. If he was gonna say anything, the one thing he could never deny is that Nirvana thing is completely fucking made up. And the Seattle Times was pretending that they were gonna correct this. I mean, I dealt for at least a half hour, if not an hour, with their Portland-based reporter who, for some unexplainable reason, I mean, he was out there in Whitefish, Montana, doing that reporting, but they put him onto the Nirvana Huff beat after that, and they were, he was sending off strong signals. I mean, he essentially told me that they were doing a story about the bizarre fact that there's a Nirvana song cited in this report that's bullshit, but I told him, you know, I'm supposed to be obsessed with Nirvana. I'm not obsessed with Nirvana. I'm obsessed with getting to the truth in criminal cases. And, you know, the Nirvana song's a good starting point, but don't ignore all of the other colossal lies in this James Allen Fox report. I mean, that's the real news, and don't just gravitate toward the showbiz side of it, although it's a great hook. He faked that shit up, he faked the rest of the shit up. It's all fake. You know what I mean? Anyway, this is only, you know, part uno of a multi-part on this slaughter situation and even the slaughter situation down the street here at the Jewish Federation, which was only on Friday. And I'm not sure that we've got a whole hour or not, but anyway, in case we don't get around to this, we had all kinds of plans for, you know, the last couple of years on, wait, we should do a Lenny Bruce tribute show, you know, the king of all monologists in American entertainment. You can say entertainment, but he very well could have gravitated or graduated toward a far more journalistic point of view with his career. It's unclear what he was going to do with his career, but anyway, Lenny Bruce, dead at let's see, he was born October 13th, 1925, I think. So that would have made him 25 and died in 66. October 13th, died August 6th, I think it was. So I guess Lenny died at 40, just before he turned 41. Anyway, if you've watched the show for years and years, you couldn't possibly know about, I think, the single airing of a two-parter we did on Lenny Bruce's Playboy pad at 8825 Hollywood Boulevard. And so we were actually on the grounds, welcomed on the grounds and all that. That was pretty cool. And so anyway, we'll probably call it Lenny Bruce Isn't Dead. Or if we get more journalistically serious and we decide that we just can't link it to show business, in any case, here at the tag end of it, we're going to call it Lenny Bruce Isn't Dead. Because that guy wrote that novel, Lenny Bruce is Dead, Goldstein. He's one of these NPR weenies that produce out of WBEZ in Chicago, where my career started. But they declined to do a Kurt Was Murdered segment. Declined with deafening silence. But a lot of their shit is faked up anyway, so in a certain way I didn't fit in with, you know, American dreams, American stories. This is your America. What the hell do they call that thing? It's been so long since I listened to it. But I was into it for a while because I thought, well, hey, I'm sort of from WBEZ. They should, like, you know, give me a one-shot here of uncopyrighted material that they can exploit to the max for forever, basically, but they never did. Never responded. And the time is 4:34, much more to come. Lenny Bruce isn't dead. In 3 months, which is a cover-up scheme. He even says in his introduction that it is probable that many of the absolute truths will remain forever buried in this case. The reason the truths are forever buried is because he's burying them, and so are you. Professor Fox and the Washington State Patrol attempted to authenticate the suicide letter without looking at the lengthy exemplar that he wrote to the court in Montana several years ago in a vandalism case. They authenticated the note with scraps of paper in his wallet and receipts, not a lengthy exemplar letter. They did not look at the actual hard drive. Even on Tuesday, March 28th, it was already known that that hard drive was in the trash and that the Seattle police refused to come by and pick it up. So they've concocted some hard drive out of thin air. And it claims to have all of this extensive material. When I spoke to Fox 10 days ago, he didn't even know about the neighbor who pulled the hard drive out of Kyle Huff's computer days before the murders. He never bothered to ask the medical examiner for autopsy information. He was told by the police attorney, he says, don't bother to ask about that, it's not important and you won't get it anyway.